that you've got to understand that because they're a corporation and because they're, profit driven, all that sort of stuff, they have to design their products around, they're not going to have multiple complex systems across different countries in order to comply. What they're going to do is that they're going to design their product around the lowest minimum amount of compliance that they can do. So those laws become blanket laws for pretty much everyone because the tech company are the one who are implementing it. Okay, so that's what you need to understand when we're talking about how the online safety bill is only in the UK. It becomes the standard for everyone else because product managers and the people at the company, tech companies, they're not necessarily going to design their product and processes because they're for profit and because they have shareholder interest and their costs and, all that sort of stuff. Costs will blow out having to, meet that standard. They're going to kind of standardize a lot of those things as much as they can in the core tech. Okay, so you need to understand that part because I think a lot of people think, oh, this is just a UK problem, or, oh, why are you talking about like that from Australia? Why are you talking about the First Amendment? Because tech law is an international thing and it is not necessarily something that can be done at the international level because the international law is actually more about conventions and agreements and all that sort of stuff. You're not necessarily, so we've got some complexities here. But I just wanted to make it clear that the online safety bill in the UK, even if you're not in the UK, affects you as a user because these, tech companies will design their product around the lowest common denominator, okay, generally. Now, Australia, not so much, okay, because we're a small market. So usually what happened, so here's some precedent, which is with Facebook and Google with Rupert Murdoch. They'd basically go, oh, well, we'll just turn it off in Australia because we're not really a market that is really that substantial. And they were basically testing whether they could just go, oh, well, we're not going to operate there. Most recently, Meta with Threads decided that they just wouldn't launch in the EU, right? So that seems to be where people are starting to go. They're leveraging their base and leveraging their user base to put governments on notice, which is basically, well, we won't operate there. So that means then, obviously users don't get access to Facebook, they don't get access to the platforms, they don't get access to search, all that sort of stuff. And so what they're doing is sort of doing all of that those stunts in the background to try and sort of, massage the government's approach to the internet. Now, how you feel about that depends on how you feel about the actual individual issue. Now, I would actually argue that this is the fight that tech is fighting all the time. That is actually quite important. So one thing again, because you're not people who aren't paying attention to the sort of the back end of all of these things, is that, tech is in court all the time over this shit. All the time. Okay. It's exhausting. Constant. Okay. So there's all this sort of tension between government and tech regulation. I know that I've sort of waffled on, but that background is really important. But the Online Services Act in Online Safety Bill, is something that is highly contentious, really bad legislation, but you also then need to understand how legislation works. Okay, so in the UK, so obviously there's differences across countries with the way that the role that legislation plays. Now, the Online Safety Bill is a bill that is basically designed to empower Ofcom. So Ofcom are the regulatory body for communication. So like the FTC in the United States, or we've got a few different agencies, but, ACMA and the Information Commissioner, we've got a slightly more sort of complex landscape. But basically, they didn't have the power before. So Ofcom are like the FTC for the UK, okay, simply, okay. Now, they didn't have power to regulate the internet. So the way that the internet has been regulated in the past is through a series of different little bills and like little sort of departments. And what the Online Safety Bill, okay, this is the charitable read of it. What the Online Safety Bill attempts to do, okay, is to bring that all together to give Ofcom the authority to regulate when it comes to social media, big tech, all that kind of, that sort of stuff, right? Media, because they already regulate like the BBC, Channel 4, all of those sorts of, like the public broadcasters. They kind of, they've got all these subcommittees, subdepartments, all that sort of stuff. Okay. Now, under that, you've got some like various committees, okay, and departments. Okay, so this is cross departments. But underneath that, you've got a committee, which was the. I'll get to that after, because this context is actually quite important when it comes to Russell Brand, because I think you get to see how selective some of the information is, and how certain people, when there's money to be had or market share, to sort of look at it with kind of just a side eye and go, like you've left parts out of this. And that is important information and important context, because if I had that information, I'd probably have come to a different view. Now, when I first saw that Brand had been demonetized on YouTube, my first response was, well, that's a bit far. Okay, that seems far. And my initial reaction was, well, okay, what happened was here, I imagine UK press is UK press, okay? The accusations are like 0.01% of anything that's going on here. I don't care. Like, it's just whatever, okay? Media's going to media. That stuff's going to happen. Culture war going to culture war, all that sort of stuff. Now, has Russell Brand made enemies over the years of the media? Should he be surprised that they've gone digging? No, right? I don't know. There's a large element of like fuck around, find out with Brand with this. Because, a lot of it has been, now this is outside of anything legal or anything. This is just my personal opinion, which is that, oh, well, he fucked around and he found out. Okay, now, I think that he's a victim of big tech, but not in the way that he thinks. And I also think that in a way it's actually a good thing. So I've started to actually write an article, which is why Russell Brand being demonetized is good, actually. That's going to annoy some people, I think, but we'll see how we go. But what I'm seeing is that basically he's gone, well, okay, it's all them, and they're after you. It's a collusion between the state. And so what do you mean by the state? Do you mean the government? Is it like a government committee? Who's involved? Why are they doing it? What's their motivation? What's the motivation of those that are saying what they're saying? You got to think, just critical fucking thinking 101. And again, you just watch this machine go where it's like, no, big tech, it's all big tech and the government, they're coming to get you. It's like, no, they're not. It's fucking, all I had to do was look at the website and I go, no, I understand what happened here. So anyway, so did Russell Brand like fuck around and find out? Yeah, a little bit. In the sense that he has one thing that I think, from YouTube's point of view, okay, I think that they've tolerated him for some time. Okay, so what they've done is they've tolerated Russell Brand for some time. If you watch his content, you will know that he starts off he uses YouTube as a lead magnet to pull people over to Rumble. So he has been using YouTube's platform and the audience that he's grown on YouTube to funnel people to Rumble. It's quite funny. It's quite clever, actually, the way that he does it, which is he's like, he does this whole sort of half-hour intro, and then he's like, well, we're going to be censored. We can't talk about this. Let's go over here. And then they capture them and take them over to Rumble, okay? That's a strategy that everyone, marketers, any good marketer, but also, cults and MLA, which, Trump does it, Democrats do it, everyone does it, which is to get you off and take you to another platform. But he's been doing that a lot. Okay, so what he's been doing is list building, pulling people off the platform, and also double dipping in terms of monetization. So his videos, he would still be making a fair amount because he's still Russell Brand on YouTube. So, he's still getting the ad money. He's still able to monetize that part of his channel. But what he's doing is he's slowly pulling the audience away to Rumble. And he will do that because he'll just cut it off. He'll just go, oh, well, time to finish it. And then it will just, people will head to Rumble. So he's very clever and very savvy in that regard. I'll give him that. Okay. So you got to look at the context of that, which is that if you were YouTube, let's say you're sitting here and you are the head of policy at YouTube or product or anything. You're just in content moderation or anything. You got to make these decisions. This would have been escalated to the policy people, guaranteed. But like this would have been a director level decision, I think. But I just know how the conversation in the room went, which is basically like, well, okay, he's been making money slagging us off for how many years now, right? But also, if we keep him on the platform with this new online safety bill, okay, we're going to need to pay, we're putting ourselves at risk of paying 10% of our global turnover as a fine. You don't want to tick off the UK government. So imagine if you are YouTube and you go, okay, well, we've ticked off the UK government. They're trying to oppose these bills, like they're doing the best they can. But also, like, you sit there and you go, is this guy worth a fine of 10% of our revenue and undermining all of our, do you want to be the example? Fuck no. And also, I think that there'd be a bonus in like political bonus in showing and highlighting the problems with the bill, which is this, so that's why it's like, it's quite ironic in the fact that he's going, oh, YouTube are censoring me and it's about the online safety bill. It is, in the sense that it actually is helping to oppose the online safety bill. And you're targeting the wrong people. Again, the online safety bill,
somebody please think of the children,
is that. But it has expanded to not just protecting children, but it has also expanded to an overall. See, the thing is, this is where I need to, in my full disclosure, I have an interest in this. This is my interest, which is I've been saying for years that tech companies do need to have a legal duty of care towards their users established, because it's not something that they prioritize, and users are the ones who suffer in the end, and this is doing all sorts of harm. So I just want to declare that I personally agree with the spirit of the bill, and most activists do. Okay? Unless you are someone who is, deliberately peddling, if you object to this in its fullness, then I do wonder sort of what's going on there. Okay. So it's very complicated. It's like I said, it's 300 pages. I got 140 pages in, and I was like, "Fucking hell, this is boring." I've got to get through the rest, but I know all I need to know for now, and I don't want to bore you with the details because I'm already boring enough. Right? But what I can do but the bill itself has an overarching, so basically the first thing it does is establish the fact that Ofcom are the regulatory body. So it gives them the powers, okay? So also in the UK, what a bill is, okay? I know this is boring, but you got to understand that when a bill becomes law, it's not instantly implemented. There's a whole process after the bill gets implemented. It's like an implementation phase. Okay, there's a gap in time. There is like a consultation process again. They have, like committees and all that sort of stuff. So you need to understand. I'll talk about that in a minute. But in terms of the process, like there's this, again, this is where like gaps in understanding around how like law works and how the laws are made and how you regulate is that it's not necessarily going to be, oh, this is the law, the police do it now. That's not how it works. Okay, it might be. It's not how it works. It's really not. And it's like, okay, so what we're doing is we're setting up a legal framework, okay, that says tech companies, you are on notice, facing criminal charges, massive fines, which is pretty massive, because the thing is, the fine does need to be so severe that it needs to be. It needs to be a disincentive for tech to ignore this problem, right? Which, again, in principle, agree with. But this is the unintended consequences and sort of least shit option stuff, which is that instantly, YouTube are going to sit and make calculations about whether this one dude and his ability to monetize, especially given that he's like saying what he's saying about YouTube and, taking their users to Rumble and, pissing off his advertisers. And they're like, well, is this worth 10% of our fucking revenue for the year? Fuck no. All right, turn him off. Because, okay, so the thing about the online safety bill is that you've got the duty of care provision, okay, in that bill. That is the core of the intention behind the bill. But also, it has speech protections in it that are specific to political speech, journalism, political expression. So Brand has I don't know what he's going to do or say here, because he really has no case, because under the Online Safety Bill, okay, they have explicitly protected political speech, acts of journalism, and, all of those sorts of things. And basically it's like, well, you're going to have to lawyer up there, mate. I don't know what to say, but I think YouTube also just see an opportunity, because, again, you got to understand the background of this, which is that bill passed this week. Okay, it's waiting to become law. It's waiting to be ratified. That doesn't mean when it becomes law that law is implemented. It's sitting on the books. Okay, there's a whole process of implementation that takes years and years. This is going to take a decade to resolve. This is what I keep saying, is just because a law is on the books doesn't mean that it's like enforceable, right? So the context of that is that the Online Safety Bill has passed. It is awaiting to become law. Now, what you need to understand is that Meta, Google, Signal, Wikimedia Foundation, fucking all of tech, the EFF, everyone's gone. This bill is a dog shit law. It's bad. We agree with it in principle, like me. We agree with it in principle. Okay, we adhere to sort of the Santa Clara principles, which you can look up, but I can talk about it when I write the thing. I'll link to it. I linked to it in my previous piece as well, which is those overriding sort of principles about what the responsibility that big tech has to its users. Okay, so the duty of care side of the Online Safety Bill, no one disagrees with, and I think that this actually does solve, a lot of problems. But you've also got protection of political expression in the bill. Okay, now those are in conflict. So what happens? All of these things are in conflict, okay? What happens when someone like Russell Brand, as a use case, is a media figure? He's not a journalist, he's a comedian, but he's a journalist, but he's doing political speech, okay? But what happens if he is doing stuff that does radicalize? I would argue, on balance, you'd have to research it, but YouTube may have the data on this. See, this is another thing. In this, you've got your duty of care to users, okay? Duty of care to users is the overarching intent of the bill, okay? So when it goes to court, the overall intent of the bill, if you are reading, if you're going to put it in front of a judge, the judge is going to go, the first thing that they're going to do is look at the intent of the law and the intent behind the law and what the main principle and core principle is. And that duty of care to users is the preceding thing. Okay, it's overarching everything. So that will be the legal test. That will be the test, okay, that comes to it, which is, were you operating in good faith in service of your users? Now, that comes in conflict with another part of the bill, political expression. Okay, so you've got someone like Russell Brand, who is technically not a journalist, but a media figure, okay, in the cracks. Technically, I would say, has a risk of radicalising his audience. Okay. And again, it's 50-50, I would say probably not, but, there's probably some data to say that some good portions of his audience become fucking cookers, especially now, right? And he does cater to that sort of audience, right? So, you've got that aspect. But it is political in nature, but it is also convenient that he gets, there's an element of fuck around and find out with this stuff, okay? And YouTube, I think they've been holding the line as much as they can. But the thing that you need to understand with this Online Safety Bill, okay, again, whether you agree with it or not, this is why it's a stupid bill, because it doesn't actually provide answers. However, I'll address that in a minute, which is that when those things are in conflict, the overall spirit of the bill, it's which one is more important? It comes down to which is more important. This legislated duty of care, which was the spirit of the bill, okay, that's what it was. But if you were to write one sentence, so you've got all these qualifiers and provisions. This is why in contract law, this is why it's better to have one page than 300, because this is what happens is you end up, putting yourself out of fucking, anyway, that's a whole other thing. But they've even gone to lengths to highlight examples of what they. So this is really seems to be geared towards the interpretation and judicial interpretation. So they've given specific scenarios, specific examples. And this is, I think, this is the literal mindedness of Americans when they look at sort of common law, is that they kind of go, well, that's the letter of the law, that's the law now. Send the police in. It's like that's not quite how it works. What they're doing is providing instruction, framework, guidance for these principles so that when it gets to court in the edge cases that they go, oh, what was the intent? This isn't, bills that should be designed 100 years into the future where, they provide clarity. Now, that's the charitable, that's how it should work, okay? But, obviously leaving gaps in the law, leaving loopholes, that does set the tone for abuse. Now, does that have a correcting mechanism? Yes. Go to court. Be the test case. Okay. You want to fuck around and find out, and you know that this could happen. Okay. Put that into your risk calculation. You want to sit there misgendering people? Okay. Do it. But you've got to be willing to go to court and state your case. Just you do the calculations, and it's the same thing with YouTube. So YouTube are not stupid. They have very smart people working there. Funnily enough, they actually have lawyers and they have corporate counsel. They have pretty decent talent working there, okay? I'm not smart enough to work there. That's how good these people are, okay? Now, what would I do if I was them? What would I advise? I would say, well, I don't want to lose 10% of our revenue over this guy who's been fucking slagging us off. Okay? Also, it wouldn't hurt if we could fire some shots over this bill and show how absurd it is. Just show how silly it is. Here's a perfect, here we go. So you've got a meeting between your PR, your marketing. There's no conspiracy. It's just a strategy, and a good one, which is, all right, this online safety bill. Well, this seems like a really good opportunity to make an example of this young fella. He'll live. And also, well, fuck it. Now, okay, I'm joking. However, there's also the provision that they need to make reasonable efforts, okay, to limit the spread of misinformation. They have to limit harms. They have to make reasonable efforts. Now, under the law, they have to be shown to have done reasonable efforts. So this is YouTube crossing its T's and dotting its I's and going, I think demonetisation is probably the best way to go, because in the bill, you can't really limit political speech. So Russell Brand's claim that he's being suppressed for his speech is bollocks. Is he being targeted for it? Probably. But that's the corporate media, okay? That's is there probably some sort of bollocks hit campaign there? Probably, okay? That's the thing that I don't think is really, it's like, well, okay. But also then, given that it's a 4-year investigation, all of the legislative stuff and defamatory stuff and all this other stuff, this is the difference between a conspiracy theory and someone else and a normal person, which is you don't bundle all these issues in together. You can see that those things are separate. Some things are true, some things are false, some things are true, some things are false, some things are complicated, some of that. So over here you've got the UK government, a little bit shitty that Russell Brand is calling that, is sort of walking on the line of sort of conspiracy. Well, he's walking on that line. He's walking the line. Okay, let's be honest. Whether you agree with it or not, he's walking the line. Okay. He's pissing off, like he's hanging out with sort of grey zone and sort of spreading that sort of, he's pissing off fucking whoever is pissing off, okay? Yes, there's a narrative component to it. Okay. Yes, that can be true, but it's not the full picture. It's not then leaping to a whole conspiracy between YouTube and the Prime Minister and the Conservative Prime Ministers, I might add. Let's just say the left aren't censoring shit. Okay, this is the UK government doing this. So be consistent. So BBC, media, garbage media, Murdoch Press, yeah, okay, let's collude to get rid of this guy because he's fucking pissing us off, to be honest. To be honest, he's pissing us off. We don't like what he says about Ukraine or whatever the fuck. Okay, get rid of him. Cool. We also don't like, but we also can't, under this new act, because he's in the UK, we can't get rid of his political speech. So we can't get rid of him. We can't delete his channel, okay, because he's protected by the online safety bill that he's opposing. He can't. oppose that. Okay, so we can't get rid of him there. But he's pissing us off. Let's make an example of this guy to show how dog shit. This is what it means. Let's play ball. Well, okay, is it worth 10% of our income? Nah. Now, it's conjecture now whether you go with malicious compliance or just compliance. I like to think that there's people in tech who are having a good old chuckle at this, which is they go, well, this is my note, okay. Because, at the end of the day, like, people in tech are not just, they're people too. And they're also people who know that this machine is bigger than any one person and even any one team. And so, but people in tech are oriented towards sort of that libertarian sort of, so it's kind of a bit of, there's a little bit of chaotic neutral amusement that goes on here. So, like, I find it funny. So let's just do a bit of conjecture and amusement here, which is that, I'm a big fan of malicious compliance, which is that, all right, well, you want to pass this online safety bill? We will comply then. And what we'll do is we'll make it look like there's a response because it was from the UK government. Bang, bang, shots fired, right? Because Facebook and Google have done this. You've seen that with Canada. They did it in Australia here over the news bill with Murdoch, where they basically threatened to stop Australians having access to news on their platform to comply. It's pretty funny, right? And I like it. Again, lawyers don't think like that. Lawyers are just that, most corporations are risk averse, right? So they're going to have to answer to, they're just going to go, well, like I said before, YouTube are going to go, well, they're going to do a risk assessment, okay? But there's going to be a part of me that would be getting joy out of it too. So it might not be malicious compliance as such. If you don't know what malicious compliance is, it is when you think that there is a stupid rule, you follow that rule in a way that is so literal and direct that it kind of shows and highlights the absurdity of the rule. So, I've talked about, we've talked about this with the gender identity stuff, where it's just like, well, let's just identify as whatever we want and see what you get away with. That would be an example of malicious compliance. But, so there is an element of that I enjoy here, which is I hope that there is some malicious compliance, at least some enjoyment of the whole moment, where it's like, well, Russell Brand, fuck around and find out. UK government, fuck around and find out. YouTube go, well, this is the reality of what you're suggesting, UK government. Here we go. Defend yourselves. Like, it is pretty funny. And Rumble, of course, they're just going to try to exploit that and position themselves as the anti-YouTube. But, at the end of the day, Rumble are threatening to not be able to operate in the UK as well as part of this. Like, that's the reality, is that they're going to be running, if they don't comply with this online safety bill, that there is a risk, obviously, that they could be, that could be misused, which again is conjecture. I prefer to focus on what, is in front of us right now and what is and what has happened and what previous behaviour, informs sort of future behaviour. If anything, it's right wingers that are going to abuse this power more than anyone else. Like, despite what, some of the concerns around censorship online and the Twitter files and that sort of stuff, they're really missing the point. Which is that there's lawful, the details matter on these things, but the thing is that the details aren't there. Because the online safety bill is just a bill that's passed. It is something that gives direction. So in terms of the department, the powers, the authority, it gives the, direction for the law and the spirit and all that sort of stuff. Okay. The actual practical details are still open for conversation and discussion. And that's why you'll see things like that, like the Electronic Frontiers Foundation and those things saying, we want you on record saying that, you understand that we can't develop tech that doesn't breach privacy in order to reach this. So that's the whole encryption argument, right? The reason why they want them on record is because it's an ongoing, continual, fluid process. So once the bill is passed, all it does is give the powers. It's the same thing with the voice, okay? All it has done is go, all right, this is what the intention is. This is what the meaning is. Here's the language we want to use. It's got sort of qualifiers and disqualifiers. Some things conflict with other things. That's up to the court to decide. So the court decides, which is in conflict and which is most important in that particular use case. Now, that doesn't mean I defend the bill. Well, okay, this is where I go, well, I defend the bill. I don't, obviously the application of the bill remains to be seen. Like it's just something that's unknown. But the problem with, all of these fucking people online is that, first of all, the corporate media are not going to necessarily poke holes in the online safety bill, mostly because they are the ones who benefit economically from it. Okay, so whether or not, in practice, right, because it's going to increase costs for independent journalists, and their costs of compliance are going to go through the roof. And news media are exempted somewhat from this. Okay, so if it's an act of journalism or the public interest or something like that, then that is specifically exempted in the bill. But what that means is that independent journalists who don't have those resources, or somehow, it doesn't really protect whistleblowers or anything like that, because like we've seen that with Julian Assange, where they can just arbitrarily say that he's not a journalist, even though he's a member of the MEAA. But, there's no real registration process for journalists. So people can just arbitrarily decide that you're not a journalist or you are a journalist. And so the language around the bill does prioritise sort of mainstream like corporate media, right? And so they're not necessarily going to oppose the bill because it gives them a commercial like edge and a comparative advantage against independent media, which is what these corporate media interests wants, right? So so they're not necessarily going to be talking about the details of this bill. Also, people don't know or care about tech; they don't understand. They just go, well, and this is the problem with the online safety bill in general, which is that it's got long-term thinking. So it's basically like, okay, 20 years into the future, we need to make it very clear what the language and intention and spirit of the bill is, because when it gets to court, all these things, we need to understand what it's a direction for judges, right? Basically to interpret the law, right? Now that's been obviously quite simple, right? It's not that simple. It's just fucking boring, and most people go boring, convoluted, too hard. It's not a tweet. And they won't even look up a word in a tweet. Like, fuck me. But, but it is easy to come to sort of conspiratorial conclusions with a lot of this stuff, because it is really difficult to understand. And also it's built on sort of a lot of big lie propaganda from the right, which is that big tech are the problem and that they're all evil and that they're all, but it's not that. It's them. It's they want to just be able to censor people and control it. And, so anyone who's sort of yelling, think of the children, and talking about grooming online are feeding the same narrative that tech, it's very complicated, right? What we need to remember, and this is really important, is that YouTube has access to user behavior data. It is their bread and butter. It is what they do. They know where audiences go from here to here to here. They have every interaction, where audiences travel. I've talked about lookalike audiences before. I've talked about audience capture before. Now, if they are running a data-driven business, which they are, okay, I am speculating, I would argue that Russell Brand has a net de-radicalizing effect. Now, I don't have data to back that up. That is based on my intuition and my experience and what I know about user behavior and the sort of the theory. I think that he pulls them from more awful sources. I've talked about that about Joe Rogan before. That has since changed with Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is now, on a different sort of trajectory, and Jimmy Dore and those things. That can change, okay? This is that phenomenon called audience capture. I have an opinion that Russell Brand, has a somewhat de-radicalizing influence in some cases, okay? But he has also been buddying up with more radicalizing forces, like Tucker Carlson, as much as I like the grey zone for their journalism and stuff, they do cherry pick and they do kind of, he's sort of, veering towards sort of that. Again, it's not necessarily about the content, but about the audience behind the content and underneath the content. Remember, there's a whole ecosystem of commenters and interactors and people who, again, YouTube have a bigger view of what a more holistic view of what Russell Brand's role is in that ecosystem. They would have it as a fucking diagram that is easy to see where people travel and what they interact with, who's creating content. See, again, another thing that you need to understand is that when you are researching sort of radicalization funnels, it's not even about here's what he has said or what he has produced, but what is building around him. But you need to understand that it's not just about the content that Russell Brand creates, but it's about the ecosystem that he builds around him. It's the same thing with Joe Rogan. And when I think what I've noticed with tech companies is that they're not necessarily concerned with people who are saying things unless they are influential and sort of cross-pollinating. Right? How it can be used. But so it's not even necessarily about Russell. It's not anyone who's saying that it's like 1-0 linear, that Russell Brand has been censored by the intelligence community and the government and big media in lockstep. It's a very childish view of how things operate. And in reality, the answer is yes. In the media, this is where people are confused between media and government and media and politics. They think that the left is fucking MSNBC and the right is Fox News. And it's like, no, there's a whole world outside of your media, you fucking idiot. And, you know, most people, yeah. So anyway, media is very powerful at changing hearts and minds and convincing people that things are true, but they're not the whole picture. But, you know, so media, yes, is he subjected to hit pieces and fucking accusations over here? Probably. I don't know. Who fucking cares? I don't give a shit. Media's garbage as far as I'm concerned, okay? Now, there's still contention and opposition to the bill as it's written, mostly because I think partially it's all good criticism, but at the end of the day, it is also doomsday sort of, you know, worst case scenario thinking. Because from the government's point of view, I also understand that they want to set a bar and they expect tech to meet it. Like they go, well, you've got the technology, figure it out. Like I can understand where they go, okay, figure it out. All right. So I kind of get that, because you do need to put that bar in place for corporations to, you know, that you need to. Like you need to make the penalties severe. You need to make it, you know, because otherwise it just becomes a cost of doing business and they ignore it, right? It needs to be a severe enough penalty for them to take it seriously and actually dedicate teams to innovating. Like personally, I like the idea of working for a tech company right now and trying to meet that bar and try to solve that problem. Like we're not going to get it right. It's not going to be, but you know, like we have breakthroughs. If everyone rallies around the cure for cancer, eventually we get there. It's the same kind of thing. It's like, well, the government, you know, and what, yeah. So it's, you know, it's very simple. So, okay. So what you would have seen here, this is out of context, and I'm just going to put the context back in. So today we received an extremely disturbing letter from a committee chair in the UK. A committee chair. It's very important to say that this is a subcommittee of the Department for Culture, Media and Sports. Okay, so they're a committee. They don't have any power. They're not the police. There's no enforcement. There is no law. They are just a committee chair. Okay, I want to just be clear there. So while Rumble obviously deplores sexual assault, blah, 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 just yesterday, YouTube announced that based solely on these media accusations, it was barring Mr. Brand from monetizing his video content. Rumble stands for very different values. We have devoted ourselves to the vital cause of defending a free internet, meaning an internet where no one arbitrarily dictates which ideas can or cannot be heard, or which citizens may or may not be entitled to a platform. See, this is a misrepresentation of the debate, first of all, because YouTube are actually in compliance with this, which is that they're trying to protect Russell Brand's Russell Brand's ability to speak politically, while also doing the reasonable efforts to limit harm. So those things are in direct conflict under the Online Safety Act, the bill. It's not an act yet. So we regard it as deeply inappropriate and dangerous that the UK Parliament would attempt to control who is allowed to speak on our platform or to earn a living doing so. See, that's not what the argument was. The argument is around the Online Safety Bill, which is that basically these two things are in tension, which is that, first of all, they have to make reasonable efforts to limit harm on their platform because they have a duty of care to users. Tick. Russell Brand, again, it's 50-50, okay? But you could argue, this is from YouTube's legal point of view. okay, that they go, well, he's radicalizing his audience, okay, that could be perceived as harm. He's had sexual assault allegations also in the comments, like there's a war going on in his comments, like, okay, all right, yeah, this, all right, red alert, all right, we're supposed to mitigate this. We need to mitigate this thing, okay. Well, we can't get rid of it. Why? The online safety bill says that we have to make reasonable attempts to mitigate any harms. Okay, let's do that. Let's get rid of it. No, we can't. Oh, fuck. The other part of the bill says that we have to fucking, like, protect his political speech and because he's media. Oh, fuck. Okay, well, what's reasonable? All right, let's define reasonable. Okay, so if we're in court, they're going to want us to show that we were reasonable about it. Oh, fuck. Okay, well, let's demonetize him then. The advertisers are mad. Let's demonetize him. It's the online say, okay, fuck it. All right. Is this guy worth fighting 10% of our revenue for? Well, no, because he's been slagging us off on Rumble for the last 4 years. Whatever the fuck years. Okay, that's like, well, that's probably how it went, right? So anyway, so this is what you saw. So anyway, so even though it may be, see, this is where you see Rumble going, well, Rumble never letting a good fucking thing go. Rumble knows this. Okay, although it may be politically and socially easier for Rumble to join a cancel culture mob, doing so would be a violation of our company's values and mission. Is that compliance with the law? Okay, good. Sacrifice 10% of your revenue then. You don't have any, do you? Rumble is making a loss. There's nothing in it. There's no problem. They've got no revenue to lose. Okay? They can make the stand. Okay, so we emphatically reject the UK Parliament's demands. Now, they weren't demands from the UK Parliament for a start. So this is the other thing they wrote to TikTok. It was a form letter. Okay. All right. Form letter. Now, I'll give you the context for this form letter. Okay. Which was, they also wrote to, just so you know, they also wrote to Channel 4 and BBC and said, what do you know about this fucking sexual assault? You promised us that after Me Too, that basically you would be more, amenable to, like, what is this open secret shit that we've been hearing about? Answer us, please. How long have you known about this? And let Brand on the air. How long have you known about this? So they left that part out. The letters to BBC. Oh, sorry, that's to TikTok. So they also wrote to, so now here is, so guess what? There's this thing on the internet. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's this, I know it's like hidden behind a really complex command, okay? It's called Control T or Command T, google.com. Who is the Committee for the Culture, Media and Sports Department? Who is it? What is going on here? What's on their website? I wonder. What is this about? Okay. The chair's comment for this specific thing on their site that no one felt the need to screenshot and share, but I'm going to. Culture, Media and Sport Committee Chair Caroline Dinenage. I don't know. This weekend, we've seen some serious and disturbing accusations about Russell Brand's behaviour, and we understand that the police are now looking into some of these allegations. As a first step, our committee has decided that we will today write to media outlets, including the BBC and Channel 4, to understand the actions they are taking as we consider some of the issues around these allegations. The allegations have been widely described by reporters in the press as an open secret, and quite often these secrets are shared between friends and colleagues just to keep each other safe. But my concern is when people in power are aware of rumours and yet don't act. Then a culture is allowed to permeate, okay? This is a government committee doing an inquiry so that they can implement the new bill and have all of the information available. Now, what do? The Commons Select Committee of the Culture, Media and Sports Committee. Okay. So they're a House of Commons Select Committee, okay, which is basically that they are members of Parliament, have offshoot communities. They do a whole bunch of different inquiries, okay? So basically, in anticipation of passing this bill so that they can actually act more quickly, they've been given some sort of funding and limited authority to start doing sort of research and talking to various stakeholders and building those relationships and asking the questions. They've done lots and lots of inquiries. So one of them is around influencers and monetization. One is around gambling, one's about scams, one's about all these sorts of things. So I've just been gathering information. Okay. So welcome to the Cross-Party Culture, Media and Sport Committee, okay? So it's both parties. Multiple parties. UK has a multi-party. It is our responsibility to scrutinise the work of the Department for Culture, Media and Sport and its associated bodies, including the BBC, okay? We examine government policy, spending and administration on behalf of the electorate and the House of Commons. You can follow the committee on Twitter. The committee also has a subcommittee to inquire into online harms and disinformation. And that's what they are. So basically, they've been doing all of these inquiries. Now, one of the inquiries that is open right now is an inquiry into influencer culture. Okay? And what an inquiry means asking people what they're doing and figuring out solutions for it and recommending changes. It's not a takedown notice. There's no court order. The legislation says that you can't censor political speech or journalistic speech. It's for fuck's sake. So anyway, that's the letters to Channel 4 and BBC saying, what did you know? And also this, right? This is the BBC. So can it be true that the media is running half-truths? Yes. This is a whole article about Russell Brand's headlines and not the content of his video, right? But again, it's okay. Woe is me. I've been descent. Oh, fuck me. Anyway, I'm tired. Oh, okay. This is where and then you see the Spectator go. Everyone's just culture warsing it. And it's we all know that you just want this online safety bill, but you just want to use it. You don't actually care about the issues. You don't actually care about the process because I want to know how many journalists actually are lying overtly about this process and saying, well, actually there are some substantive criticisms of the bill, but it doesn't mean that you are being shut down by a fucking collusion into the deep state. It is actually just compliance. They're doing it. They're going, okay. And also they're on the side of users in this case because they're actually they're actually showing the natural implications of this bill, which is that when we comply with that, this is what happens. And you're going to get the blame. It's funny. It's funny to me. Anyway, I'm going to go. It's, anyway, I hope this is useful. But I'm going to actually write something more about this, with my little clickbaity headline. But, it's fucking, it's not that hard, people. Whatever. I don't envy anyone working in policy at a tech company right now. But I do. There is a part of me that is very amused by the idea that YouTube are all right, then fuck it. You want us to go? I do like the idea of sitting there going, well, let's show them. Because the cookers are going to go off. They're all going to assume that it's the deep state and it's some great big government media conspiracy. It's no, they're just doing, it's funny with the online safety bill because Meta, they've just gone, nah, we're not doing it. Because encryption's more, the encryption side of things is very technical and boring, but basically, the way that the bill is written is basically that they need to be constantly checking for harmful content, which means that if they're constantly checking for harmful content, that means they're constantly scraping content, which is, that's not, you have to get rid of encryption. You can't do that. Right. And it's just, they're incompatible. And so the government turns around and goes, we believe in you. You can do this. And you go, no, that tech doesn't exist and they're incompatible with each other. So I don't think you understand that these things are incompatible with each other and that in order to do this, there are some sort of technical quibbles about sort of, client-side encryption and various, client-side scraping, all that sort of stuff. Apple did that. There was that with Apple about a year or so ago where they tried to do stuff on the device or whatever. And then some guy got scraped for kids, I think it was the kids in his bath or something, pictures of his kids, and fucking he got everything taken down and the police showed up and it was whoa. And I know this from personal experience. I got banned from Instagram for a fucking toddler butt funny pic that I didn't even think of. So my first Instagram account was actually banned for child porn because I didn't know and because their image things were you know, like it was for nudity and shit. It was like, no. It was a picture of Angus. The picture of the boys were given iPad minis for Christmas, and the first thing they did, Angus was like laying and he had his butt out, and the picture was of Jules taking a picture of Angus's butt, and it was funny as fuck. But yeah, it turns out that like that was so like but this is the gap. But at the end of the day, even the passage of the bill is not the end of the story, right? Which is that you've got lead time. There's a whole bunch of other laws. It's not just, oh, this is law now, call the police. It's like, that's not how it works. It's like, and even if it does get down to the policing level, right? You have rights. Go to court. That's what courts are for. You just got to, again, don't fuck around and find out. If you don't want to find yourself in this position, okay, unfortunately, I find myself in that position whether I want to or not. But, you know, like, be prepared to be the test case. Otherwise, shut up. I don't know what to say. It's not a pro-censorship view to say that. It's just like, well, don't be stupid, you know. Anyway, I'm going to go. Thanks for watching. If you find this valuable, become a patron. I'm sorry it was a little bit scattered. It's been a while since I streamed, so it's, you know, always a little laggy, but and also I'm absolutely exhausted. But there's a lot of work. Like I said, this bill is 300. You have no idea how much research just goes into fucking looking into this stuff. Like, fucking hell. But it's easy to just say stuff. Maybe I should just say stuff and argue with stuff I made up in the first place. That's a good idea to do that. Seems like a good business model. But this is where, you know, like I'm not in opposition to the online safety bill. I have concerns about it. Those are different things. Your knee-jerk opposition, if you have a knee-jerk opposition to something that you don't actually know the like ins and outs of, then I think that maybe you should look at that. Okay, and I'm not, you know, it's like, and also look around you and see like who's actually agreeing with you, and it might give you some pause for. So anyway, I'm going to go. I'll give you pause. I mixed up I always do that. Pause for thought and food for thought. Pause and food for thought. Anyway, I'm going to go do some more lull and do some more reading, and I'm going to try and write a thing about this, but I've got so many things to write on this stuff. It's just so much work, and it is something that, you know, I do like around everything else that I'm doing. So it's and it's also a little bit demotivating as well, because like AI and all those things, just it's like, oh, what's the point? What is the point in trying to add complexity when no one will listen? You know, like academics and people won't listen to me because I'm not, you know, drilling down into like academic details and boring shit. And they also don't live in the future. I live in the future, but unfortunately, most people who are in the, you know, aside from a few, just don't want to hear it because it just doesn't confirm that, you know, so it's very hard to get cut through there. And unfortunately, I'm just not a performer, so it's like I can't even, you know, that holds me back as well. But I'm working on it. Anyway, I'm going to go. All right. I love you. Take care. Have a good day. All of that. I'll try to be back there later in the week. But no, see how we go. Bye.